The dedication of the fourth altar to the service of Yahuwah. 1 Maccabees chapter 1. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Yasharal wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the nations that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein, that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the nations. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the nations, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the set-apart covenant, and joined themselves to the nations, and were sold to do mischief. And after Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, and went up against Yasharal and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar, and the candlestick of light, and all the vessels thereof, and the table of the showbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, and the veil, and the crown, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. He took also the silver and the gold, and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre, and spoken very proudly. Thus he shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary, and defiled it, insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them, whereupon the city was made an habitation of strangers, and became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Yehudah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings, and sacrifice, and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and set apart people, set up altars and groves, and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh, and unclean beasts. Now the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and built idol altars throughout the cities of Yehudah on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. Now the 25th day of the month they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of Elohim. Chapter 4. Then said Yehudah and his brothers, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this all the hosts assembled themselves together, and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest, or in one of the mountains, yes, and the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes, and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their heads, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with trumpets, and cried toward heaven. Then Yehuda appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress, until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the Torah, who cleansed the sanctuary and bore out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when, as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the nations had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the Torah, and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary, and the things that were within the temple, and set apart the courts. They made also new set-apart vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick, and the altar of burnt offerings, and of incense, and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table, and spread out the veils, and finished all the work which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the Torah upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what day the nations had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the Elohim of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the nations was put away. Moreover, Yehuda and his brothers, with the whole congregation of Yashral, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness. Hallelujah. Fear Elohim and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Bind up the testimony, seal the Torah among my disciples. Shalom, family. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. Like, comment, and share.